Good afternoon. I believe we should start with the last session of our EURAKNOS Final Consortium meeting. Please be welcome, everyone, to join this session. I was thinking a little bit about my back experience in European projects, and in fact, in the time, it was quite classic when you participated in a project that you got your job and the other institute got his job. And then 1 or 2 times per year you come together and then you present what you have done and they present what they did. And at the end, the coordinator, it combined everything on the portal and the deliverables were checked and that was okay. And that was the project. And people said it's very successful because we met each other. We made some small network in projects. But with this project of EURAKNOS, I know that in fact, I learned that project behavior or project working together changed. And it changed in a way that, okay, it is not you have your job, it's me who is doing my job, but this is the job and you have to work together. And that's what they call co-creation. And that's also what I understood. It's the policy of the European Commission. They want us to co-create, and it's not only people from the university as it was in the past, but it is people from the university, it's policy people, it's advisors, foresters, it's end users, it's all types of people that have to come together. And this is what we call multi-actor. It's the last session, and the session is a little bit in the framework of the policymaker. So I'm really glad to welcome, and we were very successful. We will have 2 representatives of the Farmers Association and in fact 2 representatives of policymakers. Let me first, so we asked them, please join the panel debate. If you have questions for them, you can already send during the first presentations your questions in the chat, and then maybe we'll take them on board during the panel debate. So the panel debate is the second half of this last afternoon session. Our first speaker of today is, in fact, Matej Štepec. Matej Štepec is from the national government in Slovenia. So he is working at the national level in the national government. He asked a question a couple of days ago and I said, okay, it's very wonderful that you maybe may represent the national level of knowledge exchange. So maybe you can talk from that point of view. I must say I quickly looked at Facebook and I found out that he is working on rural development, and maybe you can, or he will say, how did he find that out? So, you know, in Facebook, you will have a translation tool. So everything is written in Slovenian language, but it automatically translates into Dutch. So this is the wonder of Facebook today. And this is also what we aim to do with our platform. So if people give comments in the platform, then the comment will automatically be translated in the local language. The second person, should I introduce her? Yes, I have to. It's Inge van Oost. And I still remember a meeting in September last year. It was from the EIP Agri Foundation. And they called her to be, that's the queen of the Scar-Akis community. So it means that we are very proud to have her as a policy officer among us and representing the view of the European Commission on how we should proceed. And then I come to the people from the practice, and I first found Kjell Ivarsson. So he is working, or he worked at several institutes. So Kjell was working at agricultural research, also in the advisory services. Is also a member of Copa Cogeca. So he knows a lot about European activities. And last but not least is Peter Paree. And Peter asked me, please, can I have 1 minute to present a movie? I must say, Peter is also a representative of a farm association in the Netherlands. And in fact, I must say, I know Peter from walking around in the European landscape. So that is maybe most of you will know Peter also from. So he has also a clear view of what is going on in Europe, or what should go, show what should go on, how should we evolve. Peter, can you share your presentation or your movie and maybe introduce it?
Yeah, Peter Paree. I work for the farmers organization. And this is one of the farmers I know. He is talking Dutch and I forgot to switch the sound on. Oh, sorry, I start again because he is, yeah. It's about one farmer who's also a teacher. He is very active in different projects and he has built a beautiful ecological landscape around him with a lot of farmers. And he says, well, how do we learn? We learn when we share what we get, what we find. So I would like to put what we have here in this context and show how farmers will remember what we present to them. Okay, thank you for looking.
Okay, perfect. So this session will obviously focus on the policy aspects of the recommendations of EURAKNOS. Great that we've found some recommendations in the Explorer's Guide and great that we're setting up this platform, but how can policy and funding structures actually help maintain and implement these going forwards beyond the life of EURAKNOS and EUREKA as well. So we will have a little bit of a session with Maxime again presenting the Explorer's Guide, and we welcome comments and feedback from our panel members and also members of the audience. Please do pop your comments or questions in the chat. Then we will move on to Laurens and Hercules with the platform again and again. We'll be interested in some key questions around our policy brief, because we've got a couple of recommendations related to digital systems. And then it will be with me with our other 4 recommendations around dissemination formats and user engagement. And again, that will be the main focus of the panel discussion, and also opening the floor to audience Q&A. So do if you have any thoughts, pop them in the chat and we will try to get through as many of those as possible. So without any further ado, I will share my screen and hand over to Maxime.
Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this last session of today. I'm Maxime Marois from IDEL, the French Livestock Institute. And now I would like to introduce one of the main output from the EURAKNOS project. It is the EURAKNOS Explorer's Guide. So now I will just give you a quick overview of what is this guide for and what are the main contents. And the objective is to promote the Explorer's Guide to as wide an audience as possible, and saying it is there to be used and reused for the next years. I will try to present this guide and to give some insight for the policy perspective. So first, I will give you a general overview of this Explorer's Guide. And in the second part, I will make a focus on the multi-actor approach. So about this guide, the purpose of this guide is represent key insight from the community of practice written for particular use by future coordinators and consortium members of thematic networks to maximize their function and impact. So these guides bring together the knowledge and experience of thematic network practitioners, as well as good practices from thematic network project for you to explore and be inspired by it. And the aim of this guide is to act as a sounding board to facilitate the next thematic network to achieve their highest impact. About the target group, this guide is more focused on all partners and coordinators of thematic network. So it will be something to be more practical as possible. I would like to provide some recommendation, some references to the main issues that the thematic networks has to deal with. And if you are working for the European Union as a project officer or evaluating a thematic network or multi-alter project, then this guide might also be very useful for you. It's not very long guide, it's only 36 pages. So now, what are the main section of this guide? The first section is about the introduction. So something really important about this guide is deliberately not written as technical how-to guidelines for implementing a thematic network, because a thematic network operates in a complex environment. It's therefore not appropriate to provide simple blueprint solution. In section 2, it's related to the multi-actor approach. Section 3 is to give some guidelines about working effectively as a multi-actor network. And section 4 is to give some guidelines about the project execution itself. And the last one, it's to give some recommendation about some very important issues about impact and also about the sustainability of all outcomes from the thematic network. So now I would like to share with you what could be a policy perspective related to this Explorers Guide. So this guide is for explaining how a thematic network is running. It's the first point. But also it's a very practical guide. So this guide gives some recommendation for best sharing good practices from all the thematic network community to the recent to the future thematic networks. In all the guide, we try to find and to highlight all the initiatives taken by all the different the past thematic network. This guide is also an opportunity to promote the multi-actor approach. For that, you explain how to involve several partners to get a very efficient multi-actor approach, and to involve these different partners in all the different steps of the project. Before the project started, during the project, and also after the project. And in this way, we try to demonstrate how the approach works in such a project. It's also a guide to highlight a success story from the thematic networks. So for that, the digital version available on our EURAKNOS website is very useful because you have a lot of hyperlinks clickable, and you can go directly on the right website to get the best the resources. This guide is also to engage recent and future thematic network in the right ways. because we know it's not so easy to start this kind of project when it's a new project for new partners. So it was really important to have this guide available. And this guide that addresses major concern of thematic network. So it's to give some tools and guidelines to adopt an efficient multi-actor approach. This guide is also to reflect on impact of knowledge exchange to get a highest impact as possible. It's related to transfer knowledge from thematic network to end users, and also to reflect on sustainability of knowledge exchange. And for that, we introduced at the end of the guide some perspective with the EURAKNOS and the EUREKA platform. And something also really useful with this guide, I would like to share now one practical using of the guide. It will be really helpful and useful for new to have some guidelines to respond to new calls from the new Horizon Europe project. Just for instance, I put 3 topics for the new programmation. So the first one is really related to what we deal in this guide. And I'm sure the use of this guide will be very useful to try to write a proposal directly linked to the first topic, but it's also the case for the 2 other topics. So it's all, and if you have any question, do not hesitate to contact me or to ask me later.
Thank you, Maxime. Whilst we just discussed the Explorer's Guide, it was nice in the first session to have our breakout rooms and someone who was quite new to the European project sphere said that it was a really useful guide. Do any of our panel members have anything they'd like to add or comment on at this point? Nope. Okay, good. Right, so I will continue then. Policy recommendations, and as I indicated in the start when Peter handed over to me, we have established a policy brief which outlined 6 key recommendations that we think policymakers should be aware of. And these relate to digital systems, practical outputs, reach and networking, and so we'll talk about all of these in this session. So first of all, in terms of the digital system, if you've been involved in any of the previous sessions, then you will have heard Lawrence and Hercules talking about the platform that we're developing. And as part of this, in January it was in 2020, just before lockdown happened, we had a meeting with our expert panel and discussed what this platform should look like, the features it should have, and it was our wish list of what it should be. So our vision is to have an EU-wide open source digital database platform where TM project outputs can be stored and easily accessed by end users. So this can be a tool for projects to disseminate and network. It gives end users access to relevant networks and information, and it can become the destination for practical farming and forestry knowledge. I can now hand over to Lawrence, who can give us a little bit demo, and then we will open up discussions of this and how it can fit into policy at both national and European levels.
Yes, thank you. First of all, already my apologies if this is going to sound familiar to some of you, because it's of course third time that I'm presenting this today, but I'll do it in a bit of a different way. I'll do it from the position of policymaker at this point. And what is very important in that sense is that we're talking about knowledge that is easily accessible to end users over all of Europe. So compared to other continents, sometimes we are not like Europe is really a continent where you have a large variety of languages that is present, and to that extent, the language option that you see here on top of the screen is just very important and key to the platform, because it will deliver the knowledge to the end user in their language, and it will allow them to search also for knowledge in their language. Now, there are a couple of ways that the end user can get to that, but also that it might be interesting for policymakers to actually get to the knowledge that they need. First of all, they can use the search function, and through the search function, they can basically go for very specific knowledge. They can start looking through the categories, potentially also with the subcategories. They can look, for instance, for their own language for which they are responsible, for instance, when specific items were published. So that is something that is very interesting with regard to policymakers. They can also put it in a tile view compared to the list view. But you can also, and then we go back to the homepage, you can also go through the specific categories that we have here: forestry, crop farming, livestock, which are specific sectors, and then cross-sectoral themes such as environment, society, and economics. And what is very interesting is that when you go into each section, you basically land into a specific environment. You can still search within that specific environment, but what is very important, I think, for policymakers as well is if you have, for instance, a video. So we imagine that you go through a video, you can already see, for instance, if this is related to a topic that is of much interest to you, how many likes a specific topic has gotten, a specific article has gotten, or a specific video has gotten, but also the kind of comments that it has gotten. Is this something sometimes related to policy that they mention within the comment section? Is it something that might be difficult to apply because of policy? This is something that policymakers can actually use to figure out whether they have some work to do or not. You can then also, for instance, see that specific users have a specific badge, and this is simply because that means that we consider them experts. Experts means that they have been allowed to upload data to the platform, and that data basically comes from Horizon 2020 projects, which means that we consider that of good enough quality to be uploaded onto the platform. Now, one of the comments that was made during the previous session, and I want to also address it in this session, is what if the data becomes outdated? Well, in essence, it's also a topic of discussion within EUREKA, where we are looking into whether you can flag specific data, and then potentially, for instance, the author gets a message that, you know, maybe the data is outdated, maybe there's need for renewal, and that can start up discussions as well. With regard to specific authors, they get the author page with the contact details, so that really should facilitate also the access to experts, but also finding out basically which kind of thematic networks or projects related at the EU level are connected to this, to the output. So that way it also still relates to the framework from which it originated. Now, we have specifically the content, which is important, and the comments and the discussion that is possible to be had. But specifically for policymakers, it might also be very interesting to go through the community section, because if specific content which is available on the platform doesn't seem to address specific issues that farmers and foresters and advisors are confronted with, you might be able to find it here. And this is why this is very important to also add to the platform as a potential function. Then we still have, of course, the specific list of experts, because we know that, for instance, this is very important for end users that they are able to get in contact with these experts. Now, one of the things that I didn't show in the previous session and that I do want to show here is when you, for instance, have something as nice as this fact sheet. So this is the fact sheet that we used to basically model some of the presentations into the platform, simply as a tryout. So what would it look like? What kind of questions would it raise? And we notice, for instance, that there are a lot of titles, that there's a lot of specific layouts, specific information that is being mentioned here. And so the moment that we started implementing this on the platform, we noticed that there was quite a bit of work that had to go in there, and that there's no standard templates specific for fact sheets. So that makes it quite difficult to present it in this very nice way on the platform unless we put a lot of time and effort into this. Or unless the thematic networks are obligated to basically put a lot of time and effort into making sure that it gets presented quite nicely on the platform, which means that we also have to provide the function for that. So one of the other ways that we could deal with that is, of course, to just put a brief description, and we provide the original PDF on the platform. Now, given the fact that this is a very important element, that you basically see everything in the language that you've selected, this sort of starts hurting that element of the platform, because the user will have to download, for instance, the PDF and then run it through a PDF translator in order to be able to get more access to the content. It will not basically avoid the user from accessing the content, but it will make it less user-friendly. And this is really something that we in the project have put as a priority, that it is user-friendly and that the user can have easy access to the content. So this is one of the issues where I think policy recommendations can also be of very big importance, because with regard to practice abstracts, this is where we notice that this is very, very easy to implement on the front end of the platform. I think that this is what I wanted to say about that.
Lawrence. So I shall continue sharing the presentation. So related to that then, we have outlined some recommendations, as I said, around digital systems in our policy brief. The first one being that we think that having this sort of common EU-wide agricultural and forestry knowledge platform should have support from government departments and funding, and that alongside that it should also stimulate connection to digital learning, because we are aware that there are many people, possibly they might have had to be pushed towards more digital knowledge through COVID and isolation, but still there might not be that ability to use such a platform. So to make it as accessible as possible, we also need the connection to outreach to help people learn how to use such platforms. And then related to that, some key questions. So now I'd like to open it up to panel and questions and answers. Do we have any ideas for potential national or EU level solutions for what is the long-term vision of electronic knowledge reservoirs within Europe and individual member states? How can they be supported, and what about maintenance? So don't know if anyone wants to volunteer to make a start on these key questions. Inge, perhaps you'd like to say something about EIP Agri and how it can slot in?
Yeah, I didn't want to immediately take the word if anybody else wanted to jump in. But while this all started quite by accident with people starting up a thematic network and saying, well, I'm not an IT specialist, and I get several offers here for my website. I have no clue how to choose it. So it was a very practical problem. We've realized that we need some support, and that's why EUREKA was put forward as a topic. So that's a first way of giving policy support. We have made a dedicated topic to work on this issue. But it's of course much wider than that. This is a bit the history of how it all started. But for us, I think if you just first look within one country, and then later I will explain how we see it at EU level. We have in our CAP policy post 2020 a variety of elements that really are begging to have this EU knowledge reservoir, because we ask member states now to improve their AKISs, their agriculture knowledge and innovation system, in their own country. And this means that they have to connect better those who produce and use knowledge, and that's almost everybody, from a farmer, an advisor, a researcher, a policy maker, an NGO, businesses, you name it, education, don't forget that, to bring them closer together. So each country now has the task to make a strategy how they are going to improve that. In the past, we made the same mistake ourselves. We made a separate farm advisory system. We had research funding, and we didn't connect those, while in fact it's logic. What you produce as knowledge, you should bring to your advisors, to your end users, your farmers. And we didn't do that. So this is a major overhaul of the CAP, in fact, to have these AKIS strategies obligatory for each country. And within these AKIS strategies in the country, I think these kind of knowledge platforms are very important. And many things that you have shown us are very useful also for making knowledge reservoirs at national level, because we understand, and this morning in the breakout session with Maxime, I told it, but it was probably no time enough to say it to everybody. So I'm happy that I can repeat it here. Lawrence already mentioned it more or less. If we could converge in one way or the other to some kind of standards, and I even recently had a meeting with the IT team on this to see in how far, I'm not an IT specialist myself, so I'm always listening, in how far this is complicated, costly, etc. I understand that setting out as a policymaker a few standards where even member states could make a choice in between if one suits them more than the other. But if they could say, listen, these are the best ones, and as a national policymaker, you say to your national research projects, to your operational groups, to whoever is interacting with your national AKIS platform, to use those standards, this interoperability between all those is already much better. So they will get much better into contact, and that's exactly what we want with our AKIS policy in the post-2020 CAP. And there are a number of elements that we now introduced as an obligation. Innovation support, for instance, for operational groups. We have in this period 3,000 operational groups. This is quite a lot. We expect even more in the future. I hear a lot of noise that some countries are going to have more. So all these operational groups, if they could work with the same standards, that would be great. And they will more easily be able to help their applied research, their universities, their advisors, if they use the same standard, and they can use this for building their own national platform. So the work that this project is doing around looking to these best standards, and I understand this has taken some time and a lot of asking about end users, how do you want to see it, and it's probably not an easy task to do so, but it's extremely important for each country because it will help your innovation supporters, which now obligatory each country has to have, to help set up operational groups to prepare them, to help them to implement. So that's one. Your advisors need to be more competent. We have an obligation that advisors need to be more updated on the recent research and innovation. This is, of course, the way to do it. A digital platform. I'm not saying that digital is enough, because I know how important face-to-face meetings are, but it is a way to find, for instance, clusters of themes that have a lot of interest, and to find the contacts and to put those people together and to invite them. So this again is a way to do that. I think what we definitely will also have as an effect at national level is that our researchers who are a bit in their university or in their big research institute, unless you are a practice applied research station, which is very close to farmers, all the other researchers have much more difficulty in understanding how is practice working and what are farmers asking. So this is again a tool that can help them to come closer, to understand better, maybe to join one of the events that is promoted on the website. So I think the link between practice and research will also profit from this. So if you put this all already one after the other, if we manage to have a minimum number of standards that everybody can follow and that make websites like this attractive. Remember that Lauren said, if you put this PDF there, it will not look nice, but if you use another standard, for Word, it's apparently quite easy, I learned this week. And then we can immediately load in the material, and it will look much more attractive immediately. And the same goes for presentations, for videos, for whatever all these projects are producing. Now, I also told you at EU level, I would say a few words. In our new period, we will also have cross-border operational groups. And as Maxime, I think, already shown, we will continue not only our thematic networks, but very important for this platform, we have created a new format where, in fact, we want to see thematic networks growing from clusters of operational groups. Now that we have so many operational groups and more will be coming along the 7 years period, we want to connect them. So if there are, say, 10 or 50 or whatever number working around quite similar topics, whether it's a similar topic or maybe look at it a bit broader, a similar theme, it would be nice if they could work together. They already have their package of practice work done or being done, and if they are still running, they could come together and make a very practical thematic network. So we have these two typical formats that will come in the future.
Thank you, Inge. I'll just pause you there because we have a hand raised from Kjell. So if you'd like to unmute yourself and say your piece.
Sorry, I didn't want to stop you, Inge, but you gave me several ideas about pre-funding and funding and operational groups across borders, because my experience from home in Sweden and from Brussels was that in this first period we had a problem with getting the funding together at the same time in different countries, and the national funding in relation to the thematic networks or the multi-active project. We often started the thematic network before we had the national funding for operational groups, and we didn't have any pre-funding for getting people started back at home nationally. So I think what we want to have this time is more collaborative system where you can get funding nationally and from Brussels about the same time, so you can start both in Brussels with the work with the thematic networks or whatever it is, and then you can start at home with the operational groups at the same time. And when it comes to digital learning and knowledge, I think it's a really good opportunity now when we have the COVID crisis to step up the knowledge about the social media, business models on social media for farmers, how to find information on Google and what to do with the fact sheets produced. So you can really improve the digital standard at all the farms around Europe now, because we have to learn, because we all have to be at home now. So how to organize meetings, social media, businesses, but also how to find information in a good way. You reach a lot with Google, and what else do you need? So I think we will start from a very different standard now in the next period. But what I can see as a problem is the mix of fundings and getting the right funding at place at the right time, which was a problem in the first period. So I don't think we should repeat that, since we have to rely on both the Common Agriculture Policy and the Horizon Europe and other funding around Europe. We need to mix them in a good, solid way, so we don't leave any operational groups behind because they didn't have the funding at the right time, which was a problem. But I hope we will have a better situation this time. So that was my message. Keep the funding together in a new way. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Those are some great points. So I'm hearing some common themes in terms of connectivity, not just between knowledge, but also funding efforts. So we have a more direct and centralized and joined up approach. Would either of our other panel members like to add something, Peter or Matej?
Yeah, sure. When I look back at my experience with the different teams, I was already for a long time in the national funding. And I found out there is also something very interesting happening in Brussels. I know Kjell and his colleagues, together with Inge, were gearing up, well, let's say 10 years to 7 years ago, the thematic network and the operational group and the complete EIP to get started. Look where we are now. It's a situation where it's really part of what we take for granted, but it's very important that it's there and that it's continuing. We talk now about getting to the next step, and in that part, the funding is really an issue and we should keep working on it. In Netherlands, we had an example where it could work fine. We have the Nutrimant thematic network. We have the Nutrited Cycle multi-actor project, in which a lot of partners are in both, especially University of Ghent. They push the biorefinery cluster so that all the separate initiatives come together. And in those projects, we also made a national component. And in Netherlands, we have 80 operational groups working on this subject. We selected 25 to get together, and together with a national contact point. And what's interesting here for EURAKNOS, the Green Knowledge Net in Netherlands, which has in fact the same objectives now. Before it was only for the schools, and now it will be for advisors and farmers as well. They joined together in a network where we will promote the collaboration between all of them. And it's always separate money. It's really a bit kind of well, you have to be clever to combine it all. It could be much easier, and for individual farmers, well, they really, for them, it's not so easy, but we managed, and it's possible. So on this level, we can get further. And if you look at so there is a chance, and there is a challenge now that it's possible to do a lot of it electronically. Now with COVID, if I look, I saved at least 20 bathtubs of kerosene last year, not traveling around Europe. So I feel really good sustainably. And we did a lot of new exercises and it was more accepted to work with electron. There was also an issue before that it was not accepted, because if you do something just by internet, then farmer says, well, I'm not important enough to be visited. And that's over now. So we can make very clever and interesting combinations now. We are at a good moment. So, and I agree with Kjell, we should reinforce that on all levels.
Great, thank you, Peter. And Matej, do you have anything you'd like to add, perhaps about how these kinds of platform recommendations from EURAKNOS might help at a local level?
Hi to everyone. If the question is if this platform is useful or needed by the national authorities or the national countries, well, the answer is absolutely yes. As Inge van Oost already explained, we are now in the phase of preparation for the next programming period. We prepared an analysis of the situation, also at the field of EKIS in Slovenia. And what we find out that we have research institutions, we have educational institutions, we have knowledge, but what we are missing is actually the knowledge transfer. How to bring knowledge to the farmers and how to encourage or to fill to the advisory service. So this kind of platform, it is exactly what we are planning to do, to establish a national platform where we will bring together all the knowledge. But when I am thinking about, well, the platform is just a start, then there is absolutely, it's needed how to fill in this platform, then the networking, and this active knowledge transfer. So I think there is necessary to have some kind of workshops, to have field visits, that researchers and advisors go on the terrain and together with the farmers to demonstrate what they find out through the researchers. I'm interested here in this result, or just to use some of the methodology you find out here in your case, or even to be really interconnected or even be part of it. So we're really interested in that point. From the, perhaps just this one more information, in Slovenian case, there is a plan to have a national rural network to have a role. So this kind of platform we're trying to implement to the network, to the national rural network, and with their funding, but it is limited resources on the human resources and the money resources. So we will try to do as best as possible. This is for now.
Great, thank you, Matej. And just in the interest of time, we will move on to our remaining 4 policy recommendations, but this has been a really interesting item to share about. So I'm sure we can come back to this if we run out of things to talk about the next recommendations. So our other 4 recommendations are much more about the effectiveness of thematic networks and their outputs and their networks themselves. And and how they actually achieve high impact, and how funding structures can maybe support better implementation of the multi-actor approach, better engage with users and assess user needs, and have those dissemination and networking efforts. So those recommendations around those kind of practical outputs and making good reach and networking are that funding schemes should provide extra financial incentives for farmers and foresters to participate in meetings and consultation rounds. If they give their time to projects, they have to spend time away from their everyday work, so they need to pay for cover, or it has to wait to be done another time. They should be compensated for that. And another recommendation is that funding schemes should allow for more flexibility in thematic networks to be responsive to challenges that arise or develop over the project's lifetime. Obviously, we do have the option to make amendments and things, but possibly rather than all of those regulations and form filling that has to happen, to have it more built in as an integral part of the project, it might help for those to be more relevant to end users at the time of the results being shared. Funding agencies should also develop and promote a range of standardized dissemination formats to appeal to different target groups. So as Lorenz was talking about earlier, and Hercules as well, there's a range of different knowledge formats out there. There might be presentations, there might be videos, there might be reports, whatever it is. But in order to try and put it into a centralized database, those need to have some sort of common structure so that they can be inputted effectively. And also as an added kind of quality control, so that if a project that's not very familiar with making videos, for example, they've got a starting point. And finally, governments should facilitate and financially support mapping of local networks and main information sources for farmers and foresters to benefit from long-term established networks. And as I said, from the discussions of the panel members so far, there seems to be a theme of connectivity and really needing a more joined up approach. So networking networks that already exist and harnessing the established trust of those networks as well. So that was very brief rundown, and the key questions around these are again potential national and EU level solutions or implications of these recommendations, and how can we better promote the visibility of thematic networks and their results? How can we actually support those networking connections? How can we actually achieve better user engagement? And how can we achieve better reach to reach more people and impact to actually motivate them to make changes to their practices? So I will stop my screen sharing unless anyone wants to see that, so that we can see each other's faces again. So perhaps Peter Paree, maybe you'd like to start this time. Mix up the order a bit.
Okay, good idea. About these recommendations and the funding schemes, it's already linked to what Kjell said. It should be clear, it should be simple. What I experience is that you have funding where in general you can for example, when the local government says, well, we organize the funding in a way that it should be clear that the farmers take their own responsibility and they pay a part. That means if you pay 50%, the other 50%, the farmers have to make financial overviews and be very clear about what they do with that, and they don't get anything back. A clear, simple approach is, and it's already possible in the central regulations, is to not to accept all the costs, but to say these costs are covered by subsidy, and these costs they are not covered, but you do not have to put administration on it. So, and I think I discussed in the past with some colleagues in the part of the lobby work of the policy making. They said, well, it's a good idea to make farmers involved, And then with my background in the project part, I get the results of that it's a lot of work to do, which is not so easy to do for the farmers and which is taking too much effort, where you can do so much good work. So make it easy is the will in Brussels. It's maybe the will also in national and regional governments, but if you combine it, then they should keep in mind that it's not only good for the policy and that you do the right environmental thing, but it's also good to easy to do it. And I think I should look back in my own region. I think there the policy part is too important and the practical part is not important enough. One reaction.
Great, thank you, Peter. Would anyone else like to jump in? Maybe Kjell, do you have anything else to add? Yep, excellent. You've raised your hand.
Yeah. To me, well, my experience from networking is that the best networks, they are lifelong. And I wonder about thematic networks. They are 2 years or maybe somewhat longer, but maybe you could spend the same amount of money for a longer period, because it takes a lot of time to establish a network and get the best collaboration out of a network. So my suggestion is that you could maybe spend the same sum of money for a 4-year period or something to really establish a network, and then you will continue with maybe with other funding. Well, my experience is, for example, EuroDairy. We had a very good experience, but it was a complicated thematic network to establish. It took us a long time to establish, and then it was over. And I've experienced from Infogras, and that they are all very short. So I wonder how you can organize a thematic network with the same amount of money for a longer period to really start a longer collaboration, because I think the best network will last for decades if you get a good start. And have the same interests, and then you can share knowledge, and you will connect universities, you will connect the farmer organizations in several countries, and you will learn from each other. You can go on study visits, well, after COVID. You can travel and see other countries and other examples, and now you can use videos. Of course, you can do digital, but I also think that you need to meet, and not only in Brussels, because we tend to meet in Brussels. I think you should meet on farms in different countries to look at the milking systems or whatever it is, growing horticultural crops or new crops or whatever it is. So I think the networks should be longer financed, and then I think they will be established for a very long period, and you can learn and develop the EUREKA system in those networks, because the EUREKAs will be a challenge for a longer period than the EIP work was. So that's my solution, longer network. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. Yeah, Inge has pointed out that under Horizon Europe, there will be a longer minimum of 3 years for thematic networks. So hopefully that stream of thought has been taken on board. Peter, do you want to come back?
I give an applause to that. And we have nice starting points. If you look at Skarakis, that's a group of friends. If you look at other networks, when my first project was AgriSpin, and we still meet those people. It's really fantastic how such networks start and how they continue. But I agree completely with Kjell. If you give that more support and put that more central, that will certainly help.
Great, thank you, Peter. Matej, do you have any thoughts on obviously the platform you think is really relevant at the national level? Do you have any thoughts on these recommendations?
Perhaps I can share with you like 2 good practices. I think it's very important. It is on the dissemination of the results of the projects, EEP project or Horizon projects. One of them is we have once per year a big annual event together, ministry and together with the advisory services. There is invitation to all advisory services, and there is the presentation of all EP projects. So I think it is really good that people know each other, find out each year in which phase of certain project is, and when will be the first results, when will be the final results. In last year, when we have this kind of event, we have in 2 days 1,050 participants, and it was really good effect. And another one, it is like similar in a EU level. The advisory services are part of the international organization called EUFRAS. And last year, I think it was in Latvia, and they have similar, so to say, approach. Different Horizon projects are presented, and this could be also like an answer to the sustainability of the projects. People or thematic networks or operation groups should look after new projects. So the existing project to develop into another one to get to the fundings. Thank you.
Thank you. Last but not least, Inge, I saw you giving a big thumbs up to Matej's suggestion for a common meeting between different advisory services and projects. Do you have anything else to add?
Well, I should have given more thumbs up, because everything what Peter and Kjell and Matej were saying were all very good guidance things. The fact that thematic networks should be longer, I agree. We chose for 3 years in order to see whether after these 3 years it's not maybe needed to tackle some change challenges. You can go with the same group of friends because you become friends after a certain time. That's what Peter was saying, and go for a next project. And that was a bit the idea. Clearly seeing that 2 years is not enough before you're well up and running, is 1 year is past. So we think that 3 years would be nice, but we will follow up how this goes now, and maybe we have to adapt and we go to 4 years. I don't exclude anything, but definitely we saw that 2 years was not enough. What I also want to emphasize is it's not only digital. Digital is the platform is the ideal way to attract people, to make people curious, to say, there is this and that, and to find each other because you have your contacts. But then, of course, the face-to-face stays important, because there the more informal things come up, and people become friends and drink something together, and so it's really what in education would be called blended learning. So really mix the two, that's ideal. But if you would not have this knowledge reservoir, you would never find each other. And this is exactly what's happening with many multi-actor projects under Horizon. They have these networks of researchers that all know each other on the field that they are working, and have big difficulties to find people that are non-researchers that are also working on their field. And now with such a knowledge reservoir, they will be able to go and look and find who is working on the subject that they would like to make a consortium. So this is absolutely important. Peter said this 50% to be paid, make it easy. So make it easy, yes, we are working with a lot of countries about vouchers. So simple lump sums that don't ask a lot of administration of invoices and blah, blah, blah. Many countries have interest. Our CAP regulation will allow it. So I see a lot of that coming now in the future. And we also have now advanced payments. What was possible under Horizon already in this period, we will have for operational groups too. Up until 50% can be paid on beforehand. When the project starts, you have to pay your people, you have to pay maybe some seeds, some machinery, whatever. So you need money from the very start, from the very first day. And we made this happen. So this is also a nice thing we managed to have for the future. So I want to emphasize what Matej also said, not only where I waved my hand, because that's an event I attended myself, so I saw it happen. So I really saw the magic of the people there coming together and learning from each other. So these operational groups were there, the advisors were there, researchers were there, the ministry learned about what is practice needing and what is happening in our country. So this is a great event. I would even say do it twice a year. Why not, if that's feasible? But Matej also referred to money, and money is important. And I know that for the CAP networking, there is a certain limit of money. I had, for instance, the Spanish asking, do we still need the classical ENRD? Well, this is for everybody to see how they invest their money, but the innovation strand of the CAP networks in the future will definitely, we see this growing, the interest is growing, will take up, I guess, a bigger part, and this means that more can be done. But if that doesn't work, we have a great Article 72, which can do almost everything what CAP networking can do. It can pay for knowledge event, it can pay for networking, it can pay for linking up with education. It also pays for advisory and advisory offices. It can pay for innovation support. So it's a great, and on purpose we made this so broad that it can really help where the CAP network funding would be insufficient. You can just write out an intervention in your CAP plan that can cover that. So I think those were the most important things. I don't have so much to add because you already said so much. From what is collected and all this interaction you see there, which Lawrence also showed on the digital platform. You can have these cross-border groups and come together across the borders, not only the borders of countries, but also regional countries have a difficulty. They sometimes between the lender or between the autonomous communities, they also need to be brought together. And this again can help and maybe start things up with some meetings. We have a new line for the CAP networks there. You have to pay also for cooperation, just 1 or 2 meetings maybe with a number of operational groups or other groups. Why not leader groups who can join that? So this can also be covered with CAP network money.
Thank you, Inge. Time has flown and we are reaching the end of our session. We do have one comment from Stephen in the chat. Discussing the need for sustainability of the networks leads to a de facto decoupling of the project rationale and the network rationale. Anyhow, even if you extend the duration of TNs, the challenges to tackle remain. 1, long-term funding requiring reflections on business models. 2, governance. 3, keeping the network relevant, as suggested by Inge. And 4, keeping the network dynamic, avoiding stakeholder fatigue, loss of momentum, etc. So if anyone has any very, very quick responses, then please do. Otherwise, I will hand back to Peter to close the session. Seems like, Peter, it's over to you.
Before I forget, I'm really grateful for all the consortium partners who helped me to work up to this end. So that's one point. And also I'm really grateful for the presenters of the day for helping me, showing what we did. And I believe we have done a good job if I see all these comments. So just a small feedback, what did we discuss during this policy session? So first of all, we have now given a guideline to the policymakers when they want to fund new projects, new thematic networks, that they check our Explorer's Guide, which points that have to be additionally added to the evaluation paper so that they also may help and improve that the new projects are maybe contributing to a higher impact. We have listed over there the best practices, so we believe that we have done the job in a way it was expected from us. You also have seen when Lawrence was talking about the data format, that if you want to upload a PDF, that it's not just simple upload a PDF, and that is how it's done these days. And because this platform will look very differently to maybe we will have some scientists among us that say, okay, I know how to publish a scientific paper. And then you have Web of Science or Google Scholar, and then you see the presentation. You know that all scientists are expected to speak very fluently English. I must say it's not, but anyway, this is how it is presented, very static. If we want to have a dynamic platform, then you see that the way we provide the information data in a certain format is very important. We aim to make a manual. We aim to give recommendations on how we believe that the information should be prepared. There is, of course, the future, and there is looking backwards. The recommendations will be for the future, and then we hope that some people will work on European and on national level according to these guidelines, because I believe we have illustrated well what issues may happen on that. And then we had a nice discussion on the sustainability this afternoon, sustainability and how to engage people and the networking and so on. So what I remember about the sustainability is that it's Europe, okay, this kind of projects, but it's also national. So it means that if national people work with European level, then I believe that there is much more. Yes, if we talk about budget, there is much more resources. There's also much more ideas that may fine-tune everything and may come up. My personal message is the platform is there. Please do not repeat the work that we have already done. Just learn from us. And I will close with the remark of Kjell. So indeed, I have the same feeling as you have. Okay, no, I'm a coordinator. After 2 years, the project is done. And then what's next? So we have already discussed the network after the project. Networking is long life contribution, of course. I will be glad that this project is finished for my personal life, but this is of course not the point that I have now to share with all of you, because we are aiming to proceed and we are aiming to work further. And to work further, you know that we have the sister project, EUREKA, that is taking over from us. And when you step in your weekend, you will see, if you want to, you can enjoy the presentation we prepared for the handing over of the EURAKNOS project to the EUREKA. And then I wish you all a good weekend. Bye from my side.
Thank you for attending, everyone.
Did you know
Thank
that
you.
much of the new agricultural and forestry knowledge which is generated through research and innovation projects funded by the European Union never actually reaches the people who need it most? Fortunately, in our 2 sister projects, EURAKNOS and EUREKA, we've been working to help change this, with funding from the EU Horizon 2020 programme we've been building a digital platform that will bridge the gap between research and practice and increase the flow of new ideas and innovative solutions between farmers, foresters, rural businesses, and others working in Europe's agriculture and forestry sectors. To complete this, we now need your support. If you're involved in agriculture, forestry, or another rural enterprise, we call on you to help us to test and improve this amazing resource. The EURAKNOS project was launched in 2018 with the ambitious mission of creating the basis for an open-source, EU-wide knowledge reservoir that uses digital technologies to improve the exchange of knowledge and best practices in our sector. To take on this challenge, we brought together experts from 26 partner organizations across 15 European countries, including universities, national and regional advisory services, rural development agencies, farmers' associations, and others. During the past 2 years, their common efforts have laid the foundations upon which to build the most efficient knowledge-sharing tools. EURAKNOS has identified the most appropriate strategies and tools for storing and sharing data. It has collected best practices on what makes an effective knowledge exchange network and how such networks can be implemented. In the Explorer's Guide to Thematic Networks, you can find out how to engage all key actors from the beginning of your project in order to make it as successful and impactful as possible. There's also a policy brief featuring key insights and policy recommendations on what makes an ideal digital platform. Finally, the EURAKNOS team has designed a prototype of the online agricultural knowledge base that we envision will eventually help connect everyone working in agriculture and forestry across Europe. EURAKNOS is now coming to a close, but its groundbreaking work and experience is being built upon by its sister project, EUREKA. With the blueprints from EURAKNOS, our EUREKA experts have constructed the first functional version of an easily searchable digital knowledge reservoir. Using state-of-the-art techniques, they have analysed both the knowledge available in EU-funded research and innovation projects and the profiles and needs of potential users of this knowledge, whilst taking account of as many languages as possible. If you share our vision of a knowledge-intensive future for food, farming and forestry, we invite you to contribute your own project results to be included and shared on the platform we've developed. This can include datasets, publications, audio-visual materials, guidelines, infographics, and more. You can also help us to test and improve the platform by providing your user feedback. And if you believe in our mission, help us to spread the word to everyone in your professional networks. Together, we can create a cutting-edge EU open knowledge platform for innovation in agriculture and forestry. To keep up with the latest developments, please follow us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter.
So thank you, everyone, and enjoy your weekend.